Welcome, folks, to another Monday Masterclass here with my co-host, Scott Burleson. We've got a fun topic here, don't we, Scott? We're
We do.
strategic planning.
We do. Strategic planning. Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll dive into some things on this. If you guys have questions as we go, as always, just pipe up and bring them in. This is a little different, right? I mean, we're not going through Blueprint or software or how to schedule interviews, but it's a little bit more tangential, how blueprinting fits in the big scheme of things. And I love this topic. I worked inside of industry for 29 years, and one of my favorite jobs was heading up strategic planning. And I did that before we kind of figured out what blueprinting should be, but the things I learned there really fed into blueprinting. So rather than talk in circles, well, why don't I get started? As you know, virtually every Monday masterclass, we're going to cover material that you're going to find in the Blue Help. So just go out to your Blueprinting Center, click on Blue Help, and then our topic today is strategic planning. So it sure seems like if I type that in, sometimes, by the way, Scott and I I can't type. We just start typing to see if we've got an article in here anymore, because at least my memory is so bad, I can't remember. And we're usually surprised at how much stuff is in here. So at any rate, here we have some stuff on strategic planning. So let's go ahead and we'll just click on this, get started. And that'll bring us up one of these articles. Now, you notice where it put us. It's put us into blueprinting methodology. There's several major buckets. Let's look at these. We've got, there we go, a little lag there, Dan. We've got blueprinting software, methodology, and then we go through the steps. So this landed us in the blueprinting methodology area. And we start off with what is blueprinting, how does it learn, how does it fit with stage gate? And there we are. How does blueprinting fit with strategic planning? So that's where we're at. So we've got 3 articles to take a peek at today. And as I say, as we get into it, just holler and we'll take a deeper dive. We'll take maybe up to 30 minutes, maybe not even that. And then if you have any general questions that you want to cover on anything related to blueprinting, the purpose of life, any of those things, we will cover those after we cover strategic planning. So let's hit the first one, purpose of strategic planning. Now, this is something that I picked up from a book called Competing for the Future back in the late 1990s. I'm really showing my age. Now, this is, to me, the best book on strategic planning. So if you ever want to study this, go check this out. In fact, I have a little bit of evidence for that. Around the year 2000, I went into our university library, went into the basement, started thumbing through every Harvard Business Review magazine written for the last 30 years. And if there was an article on strategy or business development, I read it and I rated it and I did a synopsis of it. Well, turns out that if you write a really good book, you might get one Harvard Business Review article. Turns out there were 4 articles in Harvard Business Review that came out of this one book. So what is the essence of what they're saying? Let me zoom in here a little bit so you can see it a little better. Prahalad Hamble said, there's really 3 stages to strategic planning, to be effective with strategic planning. The first is industry foresight, then it's building capabilities, and then you compete for market share. I should say there's 3 forms of competition. So let's see what they were saying about this. First, you compete for industry foresight. And so this is getting a picture of what the industry will look like in 10, 20 years down the road, what it might be. And so we have developed these things called future scenes. So if I click on futurescenes.com, it'll take us to a different part of our website here. Oops, I hope I don't have I know it works. There we go. This is one of our growth tools here. Right here is Future Scenes, okay? And these are downloadable free documents. You can go in and do them anytime you want. And what you'll find is there's like 16 different topics, 3D printing, Africa Rising, and it just kind of keeps on going here, okay? So at any rate, that is the first thing we do is we compete for industry foresight. And these trend sheets you might find useful to do that. Use them for your planning sessions, just get people thinking about the future. Now, the second phase is you build the capabilities necessary to win in the future. Now you've got a picture of the future. Now you start building your capabilities, maybe global regions, maybe upgrades to capabilities. What about operational capacity and capabilities? Then the third phase is you compete for market share. So now think about this a minute, and I'll move on to the next article here. Why did they lay these three out? Well, what they're saying is most people just show up and compete for market share. But if you really want to win, you start with competing for industry foresight and then building capabilities. What's the difference? Well, the person who shows up for just competing for market share is kind of like a brawler coming out of the bar. And the person who's gone through all three steps is kind of like a judo champion. We know which one's going to win, if they have to get into number three, competing against each other. Okay, so that's the first thing. It's just a little bit about strategy. There's a few other points I put in here that I used to coach teams on when we were doing this 20, 30 years ago. First of all, it's a management team function. This is your whole leadership team should be involved in this. Don't confuse operational effectiveness with strategy. They're not at all the same thing. Strategy is about where you're going. It demands trade-offs. If you do your strategic planning and nothing changes, you probably wasted a bunch of time. Okay. And then this one was one I found was very helpful. Pull to the future, don't push from the past. In other words, don't say, oh, we have to think about our future in 5 years. What are we doing now? Let's do a little more of this. Let's do a little less of that. Instead, say, what does this look like in 5, 10 years? Now, once we've created that picture, now we'll pull toward it. So the three strategic planning steps are, where are we now? Where are we going? And how will we get there? Okay. All right. So that's the first article. Questions at all on these three phases of strategic planning? I know you guys are thinking you came here for blueprinting, but I can't really intelligently, I don't think, talk about how this all fits until we know what strategic planning is together. Okay. That's the purpose. Now, the second thing is strategic market concentration. So what I found useful, and I did this with many, many businesses when I was in corporate America, I found it very useful to think of strategic plans at two different levels. Check this out with your company and see if you're doing this. The two levels are this. First, there's the whole enterprise. Where are we going as an entire business, as an entire company or group, or even a division could be, okay? And that's really useful to think about what you will become, okay? That's the first level. But the second level are the market segments inside that. So let's say you worked for a group that made ingredients that went into coatings, okay? Now you've got a bunch of market managers and separate market segments you're going after. You've got wood coatings, metal coatings, concrete coatings, textile coatings, and so forth, plastic coatings, and so forth. Those are each market segments. Now, first of all, figure out where your overall coatings business is going, and then figure out each of these market segments, how you're going to segment them and how you're going to allocate your resources. So the main lesson of war, let me bring this up a little bit here, is concentration of strength against weakness. So we wouldn't call it reconnaissance, we'd call it market research. We don't call it a battle plan, we call it a business case. And instead of troop deployment, we call it resource allocation. But remember this main lesson, concentration of strength against weakness. The same thing applies for us. If we take our marketing people and our technical people and our sales people and we spread them evenly over all of those market segments, it's kind of like a general saying, I'm going to attack the entire front line all at the same time instead of concentration of strength against weakness. So what do we need to do? We really need to pick our battles, if you will, okay? So how do we do that? So I used to use something called the GE McKinsey chart. It's really old. I think it's either the late 1960s or the early 1970s that they developed this, but it really works. So what you do is each of these market segments, now instead of wood coatings and plastic coatings, I've got, this is an adhesives example, okay? We could go into window assembly, architectural timber, furniture assembly, and so forth, okay? The size of the bubble is the potential market size, total addressable market size. The vertical axis is how attractive it is, and I'll describe that in a moment. And then the horizontal axis is our competitive position. So you put all these bubbles out there, then you as a team decide which you're going to attack, maintain, withdraw, or study. Now let's look at those axes just for a moment before I come back to those 4 strategies. So what I used to do, we used to do this in Excel, and I had like 300 links going from the Excel document to the PowerPoint. They kept breaking all the time. But basically, I would have a team sit down, and I would have them assess their attractiveness of any one market based upon growth rate, industry profitability, and a lot of Porter's 5 forces. Then I would have them rate their competitive position with size, profitability, unique offerings. And the big ones were size and growth rate. In fact, some people create this chart and all they put on it is size and growth rate. Those are the 2 axes. But I wanted to do a little bit more. So you could think about this. It's not hard to put together. And then I did it so people would make an assessment and then would automatically plot the bubble. Okay. Now, how do you pick your attack, maintains, withdraws, and studies? Well, your goal is to improve your competitive position in attractive markets. One version of this chart, I guess the one I'm showing now, is our actual presence. You can also create a chart that shows the total addressable market. But this one, I told you wrong. This one's showing our presence, our sales, basically. So we want to move our competitive position to the right and make the bubble bigger, basically. So, we're not going to work down here as much, not going to put a lot of resources here. We're going to focus on the more attractive market segments. Now, when you do this, what I found, I had about 20 businesses I was working with on this. And the first time I would go through this exercise, I'd say, we need to kind of apportion these. And then they'd all be attack or study. I was like, wait a minute, guys, we can't attack the entire front line at the same time. So we had to work it over a little bit and be a little bit more selective and pick some select ones to attack and study. Now, why am I telling you all about this in a workshop? Okay. Well, that comes to the next one that I want to get to, the next article. And that is basically this. We would use what was an early form of blueprinting to go after attack and study. So that's the tie-in. So if I've bored you with everything up till now, here is the punchline for blueprinting. Figure out which market segments you want to go after. Either you want to go after and attack them, or they look attractive and you want to study them. Those are prime candidates to launch a blueprinting team for. Okay. And then, well, let's take a look at the next article. Okay. So that was a little bit on this one. Now we're back here. How does blueprinting fit? And we'll look at the third article, how blueprinting works with strategic planning. By the way, any questions on the GE McKinsey chart or anything like that so far? Everybody good so far? Okay. So here's how it all comes into play. Let's tie it all together, as it were. So I'll zoom that down just a little bit there. Okay. So let's imagine you created the GE McKinsey chart. You want to apply blueprint to the attack and study ones, okay? Now, this is the virtuous cycle. You go out and you check out this solar panels right here, okay? And you learn something. And maybe it says, yes, we really want to go after this, or maybe it says, no, we don't. But there's a lot that can change. And this, I think, is probably the most valuable thing I'm going to tell you today. And we'll see if you have any other topics. The things that can change are really, really powerful. There's a lot that can change from year to year if we keep our eyes open and we use this virtuous cycle of strategic planning, blueprinting. What could we learn? Well, we might learn that the market segment is less attractive. We really should not be attacking this thing. We learned that there's some very good reasons. For instance, the market satisfaction gaps, maybe it's an overserved market. They don't have anything anywhere close to 30% that we could work on, okay? We may find, this happens fairly frequently, it's even more attractive. Whoa, there's some really neat things happening in this market. We need to go after. We need to go for all kinds of extra resources and attack this thing with gusto. Now, the other thing we could find is it's an attractive market segment, but we are not prepared to take advantage of it. We have to get some new competencies we do not have today. So maybe we need to make some acquisitions, acquiring businesses, acquiring technology, doing other alliances and so forth. Another thing we might have learned, the competitive landscape. We found there was an 800-pound gorilla, and it was not a lazy 800-pound gorilla. This gorilla was highly focused on this market, and they are armed to the teeth and ready to defend it aggressively. That thing doesn't look as attractive as it did before. And I'm not saying you run, turn tail and run, but you do want to know what you're getting into. And so that's a valuable thing. I remember there were some cases where we were attacking an 800-pound gorilla, and later on I realized it was just silly. We were wasting our time and money. They were so far ahead of us. What about forward integration? So you might look at the value chain and say, gosh, we make this ingredient that goes into adhesives, but in this market segment, for solar panels, the real action is going to be the adhesive producer. And our ingredient, our technology really holds the key to that. So why are we giving away so much value staying back here in this part of the value chain? We're going to start making solar panel adhesives or whatever it is. Now, you have to be careful because you're going to compete with your customers, but strategically on a market segment by market segment basis, it can be a wise strategy. So now we're going to create a system, an adhesive system, not just an adhesive ingredient, or instead of just a component, we're going to do the whole piece of equipment. What about a new business model? Maybe we've been selling a physical product and we learned there are some pressing needs, and we would be well advised to wrap a suite of services around it. So let's imagine this. We've been selling pumps, but now we're saying, we could use the Internet of Things. We could offer not only the pumps, but we could have software, and we could do flow monitoring. We could do maintenance planning. We could do liquid stream analysis. We need to add services to this. So that would be a whole new business model that we've learned about. And then the other one is refined segmentation. Gosh, we thought that was the wood coatings market, but actually we got to go into, bowling alleys and dance floors and residential floors. And you know what I'm saying? There's a whole bunch of things. How do you know that? Well, with blueprinting, you know that if you do your preference interviews, you do enough interviews in each of these sub-market segments, we call them market views or market slices. And we see different importance and satisfaction ratings, different market satisfaction gap charts. It's incredibly valuable from a strategic standpoint to understand what the real market segmentation is and have your competitors blind to that fact. We define a market segment as a cluster of customers of similar needs. So if the competitor thinks all wood coatings have the same need, and that's not true, and you've broken it down into subsegments, that is a strategic advantage that you have. All right. Well, that's everything Dan knows about strategic planning. I hope, I know you guys are blueprinting pros here, so hopefully that wasn't too far off the beaten track. Let me just pause a little bit and see if anybody has any questions. And if you don't have a question, I'll even have a question for you. Is this sort of thinking something your company is doing already, or is it something you think could be helpful for them? So feel free to unmute and ask a question if you have one.
Hey, Dan, I just wanted to comment on your question. What I really much appreciate in this entire blueprinting approach is the structured approach and the tools that is provided with the blueprinting. I can say that we conduct some of the aspects that you just mentioned, analyzing portfolio and so on, but the structure, and it's almost like a guideline to come to better results at the end. So this is what I really much appreciate.
Great. Well, thank you, Lena. I appreciate your comments on that. And, you know, what's interesting about this whole matter of strategic planning is Scott and I and the rest at AIM hardly ever talk to our clients about the strategic planning process. We're too busy doing the blueprinting. But for you or anybody else, you know, if you have an interest in this area, I'm always more than delighted to have conversations. So I guess the standing offer is for all of you, if any of this information on blueprint, on strategic planning you think would be helpful to talk over again and have a call with your other, you know, strategic planning people or whatever, I'm happy to do that. It's a kind of a fun topic. We are very thankful for people like you who are learning about blueprinting, applying it. There's so much here. I'm excited for you, for your colleagues. There's so much more that we can do in this area of B2B innovation and growth that's not being done. So we'll keep chipping away at it. We'll finish up this year with you guys, and we'll hit it hard next year as well. And we'll see you at another Monday Masterclass. And of course, if you have any questions, just drop us an email in between. All right, thanks everybody.
Thanks,
Good
Dan.
seeing you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, everybody.